respected. The reason he pulls away sometimes is not because you are too much. It's because deep down, he knows you are the kind of woman who could change his entire life. And a lot of people talk about wanting real love until real love finally stands in front of them. That's when fear begins. That's when walls go up. Because a woman who is different doesn't just touch a man's heart, she forces him to face himself. There's something I need every woman listening to understand tonight. Not every man is prepared for a woman who sees through him. See, most men spend years learning how to survive. They learn how to hide pain behind jokes. They learn how to smile while carrying disappointment. They learn how to act strong even when they feel broken inside. And after a while, they get comfortable living on the surface, comfortable with shallow conversations, comfortable with temporary feelings, comfortable with women who never ask too many questions. Then one day they meet you, and suddenly the game changes because you listen differently. You notice the silence between his words. You notice when his energy changes. You notice when he says, "I'm fine," but his eyes look tired. You notice the version of him he tries to keep hidden from the world. And let me tell you something, that kind of emotional vision terrifies a man who has spent his whole life hiding. A lot of women think men are afraid of commitment. A man is afraid of being fully seen, because once somebody truly sees you, you can't pretend anymore. And you're not like the women who only care about appearances. You're not impressed by expensive dinners and smooth talking alone. You want depth. You want honesty. You want connection. You want peace. You want loyalty that still exists when life gets hard. That kind of woman is rare now.
Rare.
And rare things make people nervous. You know why? Because rare things are valuable. A man can meet 10 beautiful women and still sleep peacefully at an eye. GHT? But when he meets one woman who touches his spirit, one woman who inspires him to become better, one woman who makes him think about his future differently, suddenly he can't relax anymore. Now he has something to lose. And people act strange when they're scared to lose something precious. Sometimes he becomes distant. Sometimes he overthinks everything. Sometimes he says things he doesn't mean. Sometimes he disappears emotionally for a while because your presence forces him to confront emotions he buried years ago. You have to understand this clearly. Your softness is powerful. Your loyalty is powerful. Your emotional intelligence is powerful. And power scares people who are used to control. See, there are women a man dates for comfort, and then there are women who shake his soul awake. You are the second kind. And that kind of woman changes a man forever, whether he admits it or not. I once heard a man say something that stayed with me for years. He said, "The woman who changed me the most was the woman who never tried to change me at all." Think about that. She didn't force him. She didn't beg him. She didn't chase him. She simply carried herself with dignity, honesty, and peace. And being around her made him realize how immature he had been his whole life. That's what happens when a woman knows her worth. Not arrogance, not ego, worth. There's a difference. A woman with ego tries to prove she's valuable. A woman with worth already knows. And when a man meets that kind of certainty, it shakes him, because most people today are pretending to be confident, pretending to be happy, pretending not to care. But a truly grounded woman doesn't pretend. She's authentic. And authenticity is intimidating in a world full of masks. You know what really terrifies him? It's not your beauty. It's not your intelligence. It's not even your strength. It's the fact that you make him want something deeper than what he's used to. That's terrifying for a man who has spent years running from vulnerability. See, many men are comfortable chasing excitement. But peace is unfamiliar to them. Chaos feels normal. Distance feels normal. Confusion feels normal. But then they meet a woman who brings calm into their spirit, and suddenly they don't know how to handle it. Some men mistake peace for boredom because they've lived in emotional chaos for so long. That's why a good woman often confuses a wounded man, because she doesn't manipulate him. She communicates. She doesn't play games. She values honesty. She doesn't try to control him. She simply expects respect. And when a man isn't healed inside, healthy love can feel uncomfortable to him. I need somebody listening tonight to stop blaming themselves for every man who became distant after getting close to you. Maybe he left because he realized you were serious. Maybe he left because your loyalty exposed his immaturity. Maybe he left because venue required emotional growth he wasn't ready for. And maybe Just maybe your presence reminded him of the man he could have become if he stopped running from himself. That's heavy, because the right woman doesn't just enter a man's life. She holds up a mirror, and not everybody is brave enough to look. You know why some men sabotage good relationships? Because deep inside, they don't believe they deserve healthy love. So when they finally receive it, fear takes over. Fear says, what if I lose her? Fear says, what if I'm not enough? Fear says, what if she discovers who I really am? And instead of facing those fears, they run. Not because the woman lacked value, but because her value forced them to confront their insecurities. I wish more women understood that. You can be the right woman and still meet the wrong timing in someone's life. That doesn't reduce your worth. Sometimes you meet a man before he's emotionally prepared for the kind of love you carry. And that hurts, because you see the good in him. You see his potential. You see the softness hidden beneath his pride. You see the little boy inside the grown man who just wanted to feel accepted. And because your heart is genuine, you try to love him patiently. But listen carefully to me now. You cannot heal somebody by abandoning yourself. That's where many good women lose themselves. They become so focused on understanding his pain that they ignore their own. They excuse disrespect. They tolerate inconsistency. They shrink themselves hoping he'll finally feel comfortable enough to stay. The right man will not require you to betray your own soul just to keep him. And the strongest thing a woman can do is remain loving without losing her standards. That balance is rare, very rare. A weak woman accepts anything because she fears being alone. A strong woman would rather walk alone than beg for crumbs pretending they're love. And trust me, men know the difference, even if they never say it out loud. A man may test boundaries with many women, but the woman who respects herself deeply changes the way he sees relationships forever. Because she teaches him something most people never do, that love and self-respect can exist together. Now, let me tell you something powerful. The reason you often feel misunderstood is because you operate from depth in a shallow world. You feel deeply, you love deeply, you think deeply. And people who only live on the surface will never fully understand someone like you. That's why you sometimes feel lonely, even in crowded rooms. That's why small talk exhausts you. That's why fake energy drains your spirit. You crave something real, and realness is becoming rare. But don't ever apologize for that. The world needs more women who still believe in loyalty. The world needs more women who still believe in kindness without weakness. The world needs more women who still believe love should feel safe instead of confusing. And one day, the right man will not be terrified by your depth. He will be grateful for it. Because healed men exist too. Men who are emotionally mature, men who communicate, men who don't run from accountability, men who recognize the value of a good woman before losing her. But until that day comes, never lower your standards just because somebody was intimidated by your light. Never make yourself smaller so insecure people feel comfortable around you. And never confuse somebody's inability to love you properly with proof that you are hard to love. You are not hard to love. You are simply hard to manipulate. There's a difference. And people who benefit from confusion often fear clarity. That's why your honesty unsettles some men. Because honest women cannot be controlled through games. You ask direct questions. You expect consistency. You pay attention to actions instead of empty promises. And that forces a man to either rise emotionally or disappear. Some disappear. Not because you fail, but because growth requires courage. And courage is rare. There was a woman once who spent years believing she was too much, too emotional, too caring, too deep, too honest. Every relationship she entered seemed to end the same way. In the beginning, the man would be fascinated by her. He'd tell her she was different from every woman he'd ever met. He would stay awake talking to her for hours. He would open up about childhood wounds, dreams he never told anybody, fears he kept hidden from the world. And then slowly, something would shift. The same depth he once admired became the very thing he started avoiding. He would pull away, respond less, act confused, become emotionally unavailable. And because she loved deeply, she blamed herself every single time. She thought maybe she needed to be less emotional, maybe less available, maybe less honest. Maybe she should stop caring so much. But one day an older woman told her something that changed her life forever. She said, "Baby, you are not too much for the right person. You are simply exposing the limitations of the wrong ones. That hit her hard because for the first time she realized something important. Some people are attracted to light until it reveals the darkness they've been hiding inside themselves. See, when you are a genuine woman, you unintentionally challenge people just by existing. Your loyalty challenges inconsistent people. Your honesty challenges liars. Your peace challenges chaotic people. Your emotional maturity challenges emotionally immature people. And many times, instead of rising to meet your energy, they retreat from it. Not because you are wrong, but because growth feels uncomfortable. That's why some men admire strong women from a distance but struggle to love them closely. Because a powerful woman requires emotional accountability. You can't just say anything. You can't disappear for days and return with two excuses. You can't keep giving half effort while expecting full loyalty. And a man who has lived carelessly his whole life will feel pressure around a woman who carries herself with intention. Now let me make something clear. A woman's strength is not in how loud she speaks. It's in how deeply she respects herself. Some women scream for attention because they are terrified of being unseen. But a woman who knows her worth doesn't need to force anything. Her energy speaks before she does. Her presence changes rooms. Her peace unsettles chaos. And her absence teaches lessons words never could. That's the kind of woman you are becoming. And the transformation scares people who benefited from the older version of you, especially men who expected you to settle. See, there are some men who feel comfortable around women they can easily predict. Women who tolerate disrespect. Women who constantly chase validation. Women who accept bare minimum effort and call it love. But when a man meets a woman who can walk away from inconsistency with tears in her eyes and dignity in her spirit, that changes everything. Because now he realizes he can actually lose her. And loss creates awareness. A lot of men do not recognize value during comfort. They recognize value during absence. When the good morning texts stop, when the emotional support disappears, when the warmth leaves the room, when the woman who once poured love into his life finally becomes silent, that silence becomes heavy, and suddenly he remembers everything he took for granted. Your encouragement, your patience, your softness, your belief in him, the way you celebrated him even when he doubted himself, the way your voice calmed his storms, the way your presence made life feel lighter. See, men don't always express emotions immediately. Sometimes they understand your value long after you're gone. That's why some men come back years later talking about, I never met another woman like you. Of course they didn't. Because women like you are rare. You love with sincerity in a world full of performance. And sincere love leaves permanent fingerprints on people's hearts, even if they pretend otherwise. But listen carefully. Do not build your life waiting for somebody to realize your worth. That is not your job. Your job is to continue growing, continue healing, continue becoming the woman God created you to be. Because one of the most dangerous things a woman can do is pause her entire life, hoping somebody eventually chooses her correctly. Choose yourself correctly first. A lot of women lose years trying to convince emotionally unavailable men to love them properly. But real love does not require endless convincing. Healthy love flows with honesty, effort, and mutual respect. Yes, relationships require work, but love should not feel like begging somebody to care consistently. And I need somebody listening tonight to stop romanticizing emotional stew. You gay golly as proof of deep connection. Confusion is not love. Mixed signals are not love. Constant anxiety is not love. Having to decode somebody's feelings every day is not love. Love brings clarity. Love brings safety. Love brings peace. Now, that doesn't mean love is perfect. No relationship is perfect. But healthy love does not constantly leave you questioning your value. And the reason this message matters is because many women secretly believe they must earn love through sacrifice. So they overgive, overexplain, overcompromise, overstay. They become emotional rehabilitation centers for wounded men who refuse to heal. And while compassion is beautiful, self-abandonment is not. You cannot save somebody who is committed to misunderstanding you. You cannot force emotional maturity into someone who avoids accountability. And you cannot build a peaceful relationship with someone addicted to emotional chaos. That truth hurts, especially when your heart sees potential in you people. See, women like you often fall in love with potential. You see who he could become. You see the greatness hidden beneath the fear. You imagine the future version of him if he finally healed. But relationships are built on reality, not imagination. And loving potential too long can break your spirit, because potential does not hold your hand at night. Potential does not communicate consistently. Potential does not apologize sincerely. Potential does not build stability. Reality does. And one of the hardest lessons mature women learn is this: love somebody for who they are now, not who you hope they'll eventually become. That lesson changes everything. Because when you stop chasing potential, you start protecting your peace. And protecting your peace is one of the highest forms of self-respect. People will call you cold when you stop tolerating nonsense. They'll call you hard to deal with when you start setting boundaries. They'll say you changed when according. S to you is no longer easy. But growth always makes insecure people uncomfortable. Always. The same people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will complain the loudest when you finally create them. And sometimes the man who fears losing you is the same man who never fully appreciated you while he had you. That's the tragedy of emotional immaturity. Some people only understand value after damage has already been done. But let me tell you something beautiful tonight. Every painful experience taught you something. Every heartbreak sharpened your intuition. Every disappointment strengthened your standards. Every betrayal pushed you closer to becoming the woman you were meant to be. You are not becoming bitter. You are becoming wiser. There's a difference. Bitterness closes the heart. Wisdom protects it. And protecting your heart does not mean becoming cruel. It means becoming discerning. It means paying attention to patterns instead of promises. It means recognition. Recognizing red flags without trying to repaint them green. It means understanding that chemistry alone is not compatibility. That lesson alone could save people years of pain, because attraction can pull two people together emotionally while incompatibility slowly destroys them mentally. A man can desire you deeply and still be incapable of loving you properly. That's real. And many women suffer because they confuse intensity with emotional safety. But intensity is not always love. Sometimes intensity is trauma bonding. Sometimes intensity is insecurity. Sometimes intensity is fear of abandonment disguised as passion. Real love may feel calmer than what you're used to, healthier than what you're used to, safer than what you're used to. And because it's unfamiliar, some people sabotage it without realizing, especially men who have spent years connecting through ego instead of vulnerability. But one day, a healed man will meet your energy differently. He will not be terrified, too deep by your standards. He will respect them. He will not disappear during difficult conversations. He will communicate. He will not punish you for having emotions. He will make space for them. He will not make you feel too deep. He will finally make you feel understood. And when that day comes, all the confusion from the past will suddenly make sense. Because you realize every painful lesson was preparing you to stop settling for less than you deserve. You know what breaks my heart sometimes? Watching good women question their value because they loved the wrong man too deeply. I've seen women who were full of light slowly become exhausted trying to prove their worth to somebody emotionally unavailable. Women who once laughed freely begin overthinking every text message. Women who once trusted their intuition start doubting themselves because somebody inconsistent kept feeding them confusion. And the saddest part is, many of those women were never asking for too much. Hey, was simply asking the wrong person. There's a huge difference. Wanting honesty is not asking for too much. Wanting consistency is not asking for too much. Wanting reassurance, respect, effort, and emotional safety is not asking for too much. Those are basic emotional needs. But when a person is emotionally immature, even basic love feels overwhelming to them. See, immature people love convenience more than connection. They want the benefits of loyalty without the responsibility of commitment. They want emotional support without emotional accountability. They want access to your heart while still keeping one foot out the door. And a woman like you eventually becomes terrifying because you force clarity. You ask real questions. You notice emotional inconsistency. You don't just hear words, you observe actions. And people living in emotional confusion hate being emotionally understood. That's why some men become defensive around emotionally intelligent women. Because deep down, they know you can see through the performance. You can feel when effort changes. You can sense when energy shifts. You can recognize when affection becomes manipulation. And once a man realizes he cannot fool you easily, one of two things happens. He either matures or he distances himself. That's why your presence creates such strong reactions in people, because authenticity exposes masks naturally. I need every woman listening tonight to hear this carefully. You are not difficult because you require honesty. You are not intimidating because you have standards. You are not too emotional because you express your feelings clearly. In fact, emotionally healthy communication is one of the greatest forms of maturity. But in today's world, emotional avoidance has become so common that honesty feels aggressive to people who are used to hiding. That's why some men panic when they meet a woman who communicates directly. A woman who says, "Tell me the truth." A woman who says, "Consistency matters to me." A woman who says, "I'm not interested in games." Because now they can no longer survive on charm alone. And let me tell you something many people never admit. A lot of men are not used to emotionally secure women. They are used to women who tolerate breadcrumbs, women who constantly chase, women who abandon themselves trying to hold on to relationships. But a secure woman moves differently. She loves deeply, but she also leaves when she feels repeatedly disrespected. And that combination is powerful because she teaches people that love is not unconditional access. Love still requires care. Effort still matters. Respect still matters. And if somebody repeatedly mishandles your heart, walking away is not weakness. It is wisdom. See, people often romanticize staying through pain no matter what. But sometimes strength looks like leaving. Sometimes strength looks like accepting painful truth instead of comforting lies. Sometimes strength looks like saying, "I love you, but I cannot continue abandoning myself to keep this relationship alive." That takes courage, especially for women with soft hearts, because soft-hearted women tend to see goodness everywhere, even in people who continuously hurt them. That's why boundaries are so important. Boundaries protect kind people from becoming emotionally destroyed by their own compassion. Without boundaries, empathy becomes self-destruction. And many women were taught that setting boundaries makes them selfish. Boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are protection. They teach people how to treat you. And the right man will never resent healthy boundaries. He will appreciate them because emotionally mature men understand structure creates security. Only people benefiting from your lack of boundaries become angry when you create them. Remember that. Now, let's talk about something deeper. The reason your energy unsettles certain men is because you awaken emotional responsibility inside them. A woman like you doesn't just ask, "Do you love me?" Your presence silently asks, "Are you ready to become the man you keep pretending to be?" That question terrifies emotionally immature men because suddenly they must confront themselves honestly. Suddenly excuses don't work anymore. Suddenly they feel pressure to grow emotionally. And growth is uncomfortable. Growth requires vulnerability. Growth requires accountability. Growth requires healing. A lot of people want love without transformation, but real love transforms you. Real love exposes wounds. Real love reveals insecurities. Real love forces you to confront your habits, fears, ego, and emotional patterns. That's why healthy relationships can feel overwhelming to wounded people. Healthy love demands emotional honesty, and emotionally unavailable people often mistake emotional honesty for pressure. But listen carefully. You cannot shrink your soul to make emotion. You immature people comfortable. Never dim your light because somebody else refuses to heal. The world already has enough disconnected people pretending they don't care. What it needs are more emotionally aware women who continue loving wisely without losing themselves. And I know sometimes you get tired of being misunderstood, tired of being the strong one, tired of carrying emotional depth in a world addicted to superficiality. Sometimes you wish somebody would find and love you with the same consistency you give others. And that feeling is valid because strong women need softness too. Even the woman who comforts everybody else secretly longs for someone who understands her heart without making her beg for basic care. But don't let temporary loneliness trick you into accepting permanent disrespect. Loneliness passes. Misalignment drains your soul. There is nothing lonelier than being emotionally neglected inside a relationship. Nothing. Sleeping beside someone, who cannot emotionally meet you, is one of the heaviest forms of sadness a person can experience. That's why peace matters more than appearances. Some relationships look beautiful publicly but feel empty privately. Never envy relationships you know nothing about. Real love is not about social media perfection. Real love is about emotional safety behind closed doors. Can you cry without being mocked? Can you communicate without fear? Can you express needs without punishment? Can you trust their consistency when life gets difficult? That's what matters. And one day you'll realize something powerful. Every person who mishandled your heart was preparing you to recognize genuine love when it finally arrives. Because pain sharpens discernment. Now you notice red flags faster. Now you trust actions more than words. Now you pay attention to consistency instead of chemistry alone. Now you understand that attraction without emotional maturity creates chaos. That wisdom came through experience, painful experience, but valuable experience. And let me say this to every woman who feels discouraged tonight. Please stop measuring your worth by who failed to recognize it. A blind person cannot define the beauty of sunlight, and emotionally unavailable people cannot define your lovability. Some people meet extraordinary women during seasons when they are too emotionally broken to appreciate them properly. That is unfortunate, but it is not your burden to carry forever. Do not spend years mourning people who lack the emotional capacity to meet you where you stood. Bless them, learn the lesson, and keep moving forward. Because your future cannot open while your spirit remains trapped in old disappointment. There is still joy ahead of you. There is still healthy love ahead of you. There is still peace ahead of you. And most importantly, there is still a version of yourself waiting to emerge once you fully stop settling for emotionally inconsistent. You people, that future version of you is wiser, calmer, more discerning, more fulfilled. And she no longer apologizes for requiring depth, honesty, and effort because she finally understands something life tried to teach her all along. The right people will never punish you for having a genuine heart. One day, you're going to look back at everything you tolerated, and it's going to shock you. Not because you were weak, but because your heart was pure. See, people with genuine hearts always believe love can heal everything. They believe patience can change people. They believe understanding someone deeply will eventually inspire them to love correctly. And sometimes that hope keeps you in situations far longer than you should stay. You keep giving chances, keep explaining your feelings, keep forgiving behavior that slowly chips away at your spirit. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you see humanity in people even when they fail you. That's both your gift and your danger. Because empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. And there comes a moment in every strong woman's life where she finally gets tired. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. Tired of carrying relationships emotionally. Tired of explaining basic respect. Tired of hoping potential finally turns into consistency. And when that moment comes, something inside her changes permanently. She stops chasing closure from people committed to confusion. She stops begging for effort. She stops shrinking herself to fit into spaces that cannot honor her properly. And quietly, she begins choosing peace. That transformation is powerful because a woman who finally values her peace becomes unstoppable emotionally. Now she notices energy faster. Now she walks away sooner. Now she trusts patterns instead of promises. Now she understands that love without consistency creates emotional instability. And suddenly, the same woman who once cried herself to sleep over being a bad one, nominated becomes the woman who can lovingly detach from what no longer aligns with her spirit. That's growth, real growth. Not becoming cold, not becoming heartless, just becoming wiser about where your heart deserves to rest. And let me tell you something many people won't say out loud. A woman becomes dangerous in the most beautiful way when she finally realizes she does not need validation to recognize her own worth. Because now manipulation loses power over her. Fear loses power over her. Loneliness loses power over her. She still desires love, but she no longer chases it from unavailable people. That energy changes everything. And ironically, that's usually when men begin realizing what they lost. Because confidence rooted in self-respect is unforgettable. See, many men are used to women emotionally collapsing after rejection. They're used to women begging for clarity, over-explaining their feelings, and fighting endlessly for inconsistent relationships. But when a man heals, when she accepts reality instead of fantasy, when she walks away with grace instead of chaos, that stays in a man's mind forever. Because now he realizes your love was real, and real love is rare. The problem is some people only recognize genuine connection after they've damaged it through immaturity, and that regret can haunt them for years. I've seen men become successful, wealthy, admired by everybody around them, and still quietly think about the woman who truly understood their soul. Not because she was perfect, but because she was authentic, because she believed in him before the world did, because her love felt safe, because her presence felt like peace. And peace is unforgettable in a chaotic world. But hear me carefully tonight. Do not let somebody's delayed realization become the center of your life story. Some people will understand your value too late. That is life. But your purpose is not to wait around hoping broken people eventually evolve. Your purpose is to continue becoming whole yourself. And healing changes a woman in ways the world can't ignore. A healed woman speaks differently, chooses differently, loves differently. She no longer mistakes attention for intention. She no longer confuses chemistry with compatibility. She no longer ignores red flags because somebody has potential. And most importantly, she no longer abandons herself trying to save relationships that only survive through her suffering. That lesson right there can save years of heartbreak, because love was never meant to destroy your peace. Yes, love requires sacrifice sometimes. Yes, relationships require patience. But healthy love should still nourish your spirit more than it drains it. A relationship should not constantly leave you anxious, insecure, emotionally exhausted, and confused. That's not passion. That's instability. And many people grew so accustomed to emotional roller coasters that calm love feels unfamiliar to them. But calm is beautiful. Calm is healthy. Calm is where trust grows. The right relationship will not constantly make you question where you stand. You won't need to decode mixed signals every week. You won't have to beg for communication. You won't feel emotionally unsafe expressing your feelings. Instead, you'll feel seen, respected, chosen consistently. And until that kind of love enters your life, never believe being alone is the worst thing that can happen to you. Losing yourself while trying to keep somebody else is far worse. Never forget that. There are women in relationships right now who feel deeply lonely because the person beside them cannot emotionally connect with them. And there are women alone right now who are slowly healing, growing, rediscovering themselves, and preparing for healthier love in the future. Being alone is not failure. Sometimes solitude is preparation. Preparation for deeper wisdom. Preparation for stronger boundaries. Preparation for healthier choices. And maybe that's what this season of your life has really been about all along. Not punishment, preparation. Because the woman you are becoming now is far stronger than the woman who once accepted bare minimum effort out of fear of losing people. Now you understand your value is not dependent on who stays. Now you understand love should not require self-abandonment. Now you understand emotionally unavailable people often fear emotionally healthy women because healthy women force honesty. And honesty terrifies people who built their identity around avoidance. That's why your energy unsettles certain men. You make them feel things they spent years suppressing. You awaken emotional debt they tried to ignore. You challenge them to become more mature, more accountable, more intentional. And not everybody is brave enough for that kind of transformation. But the right man will be. The right man will not fear your depth. He will admire. He will not pee. You eunice your honesty. He will protect it. He will not disappear when emotions become real. He will lean closer because emotionally mature love does exist. And when you finally experience it, you'll understand why the emotionally confusing relationships from your past never worked. They were lessons, not destinations. And one day, the woman who once cried wondering why she was too much will smile quietly after realizing the truth. She was never too much. She was simply too real for people committed to superficial love. One day, the right man won't fear your depth. He'll thank God he found a woman brave enough to love with honesty, loyalty, and soul. Never shrink your heart to fit into somebody else's emotional limitations, because the love meant for you will never require you to become less of yourself.